You are engaging in the ELA Guidebooks Unit, Voices in America. The purpose of this video is to help you to understand important events that took place in history where American people found their voice to stand up for what they believed in. Be sure you have your handout and something to write with as you watch this video. Can you imagine a time when women were told that they could not have the same education, jobs, or the same rights as men? Before the women's suffrage movement during the early 1900s, women were not treated equally to men. It was thought that men could do more than women because they were smarter and stronger. So what is women's suffrage? The term suffrage is based on a Latin word that means to vote. Women were affected by the laws in place during this time and were not allowed to vote. Women's suffrage was the act of women and others who supported them fighting for the right to vote. Women's suffrage began in the 1840s and did not end until 1920. Can you imagine fighting for something for close to 100 years? These women, their children, and their children's children fought for women to have the same rights as men, but especially for the right for women to vote. The women during this time period were fighting against the idea that women were only to take care of their household and their family. In 1848, a group of politicians met and decided that women did deserve to have their own views on who to vote for. This group of people agreed that women should be included in the rights promised in the Declaration of Independence. They came to the conclusion that the Declaration of Independence should actually say that all men and women are created equal. Now you are ready to share your thinking about what women's suffrage was. Pause this video to record your answers at the first stop sign and press play when you are ready to continue. Let's review. Your answers might include: women's suffrage is the term given to women who fought for their rights to vote. They began to fight for this right in the 1840s and fought for this right until 1920. The movement was important to our country because these women stood up for something that they believed in and changed history for women in the United States for forever. Let's take a closer look at a timeline of some of the important events that took place for nearly a century where women were finally given the right to vote. In 1848, the first U.S. Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. About 300 women and men attended, including Frederick Douglass, the only African-American person in attendance. The convention passed a declaration of sentiments describing what they wanted to change: women's rights to vote, have a vote in creating laws, and property ownership. In March of 1913, more than 5,000 women marched in Washington the day before President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration to push for the right to vote. This event became known as the Women's Suffrage Procession. In 1960, Jeannette Rankin became the first woman to be elected to Congress. She represented Montana, which was a state that already granted women the right to vote. She continued to fight for women's rights while serving in Congress. Finally, in 1920, all of the hard work paid off, and what women fought for generations became a reality. Women across the country were granted the right to vote. Before the right to vote was granted to women in 1920, some women faced consequences for standing up for what they believed in. Because it was illegal for women to vote, women could go to jail for attempting to vote. One brave activist, Susan B. Anthony, was determined to take a stand for women. She decided she was going to vote in a presidential election, even though she knew it was illegal. She traveled the country giving speeches, gathering signatures for petitions, and lobbying Congress for women's rights to vote. She even drafted the first version of the 19th Amendment in 1878. This idea of an amendment to the Constitution would not become a reality for nearly 40 more years. For women to gain the right to vote, it had to be passed into a law. The United States laws are based on the Constitution. An amendment is an addition to the Constitution that changes previous stated laws or adds new laws for the people of our country. Amendments have to be voted on and passed on by the citizens of the United States. Thankfully, there were more than enough people who agreed that women should have the right to vote, and the 19th Amendment was approved in 1920. Now you are ready to share your understanding of how women won the right to vote. Pause this video and record your answers on your handout at the second stop sign. Press play when you are ready to continue. Let's review. Many women supported the women's suffrage movement and were determined to be heard. Brave activists like Susan B. Anthony traveled giving speeches, organizing petitions, and lobbying for women's rights to vote. Suffragettes participated in large marches to bring awareness to women's fights for equal rights. When it was time to vote for the 19th Amendment, supporters campaigned to share why women deserve the right to vote. You are becoming an expert in the women's suffrage movement. As you read in the text in the ELA Guidebooks Unit, Voices in America, you will use this knowledge to help you think closely about what you read. When you finish this video, be sure to turn in your completed handout to your teacher.